Hey there everybody, it's Zach at Feel Free to Argue. Got a lot of ground to cover with this video. I'm going to try to get it all in 10 minutes. We're talking about torture. First, we're going to look at the origins of torture techniques. Secondly, we're going to look at the bogus ticking time bomb argument. Third, we're going to look at some of the costs of our torture program. And finally, we'll try to figure out why we do torture. So first, in terms of the origin of our current torture techniques. Most of these techniques, and these are the techniques that are represented by the SEER system. These are the ones that are in the QBARC interrogation manual that was produced by the CIA and taught at the School of Americas. And they're the techniques basically that are in use to this day in Abu Ghraib prison in Guantanamo Bay. These were developed by a Canadian psychologist, Ewan Cameron. And this was in the middle of the last century. He got this idea that he could totally destroy human personalities. So these are like, people who had terrible lives. And he said, okay, well, the only thing we can do, we can't really fix them by talking to them like Freud wants us to do. What we really need to do is totally eradicate their personality and then rebuild it once we have that kind of blank slate, that tabula rasa to write on. So he engaged in all these techniques, the hot and the cold, the time disorientation, sensory deprivation. And once he had totally destroyed their personalities, he tried to rebuild them by playing these tape loops saying things like, you're a good parent and people like you and you're a smart person. And, hoping that this would rebuild the new happy version of themselves. Well, of course, it was a complete disaster. The guy was completely discredited. And, but he did get the attention of the CIA, who realized that these techniques were brilliant interrogation/torture techniques. But I think the important thing to realize is that the source material for this is a failed experiment that was designed to create blank slates. So we should never forget this about our current torture techniques, that they are not designed to get information out of people. And true to form, they don't really work for it. Where are the successes of our torture program? And I know people are going to say, oh, it's a secret program. They can't talk about, if there were successes, they would talk about them. The same way that they would talk about Iraq successes, if there were any Iraq successes to talk about. No success stories means there aren't any. So, let's look at the bogus ticking time bomb argument, because this is what undergirds all of this. Now, this is important to realize for what it is. It is kind of your gateway to becoming an evil person. Let's look at what this, ticking time bomb argument does. The first thing it does is it kind of drags the torture absolutist and pins him in a corner and says, okay, we've got this guy, he's planted a bomb, we know, he knows where it is. Are you going to say that we can't torture him to get that information out of him? Well, there you go. You won. Yes, I admit it. We should torture that guy. But we don't ask then the more important question. One, do the techniques that we're using actually get that information out of him? Two, how common is this scenario? And I think this is an important question to ask, because we've locked up and tortured thousands, I think it's actually tens of thousands of people. Are there that many bombs? Have we stopped them all? Clearly you can see this is a slippery slope. And I think nobody really documents this whole kind of slippery slope better than David Luban, who wrote an article in the Virginia Law Review called Liberalism, Torture, and the Ticking Time Bomb. I'll probably put that in the sidebar as well. And he has an excellent comment here where he kind of explains how desperately flawed this whole thinking is. In a world of uncertainty and imperfect knowledge, the ticking time bomb scenario should not form the point of reference. The ticking bomb is the picture that bewitches us. The real debate is not between one guilty man's pain and hundreds of innocent lives. It is the debate between the certainty of anguish and the mere possibility of learning something vital and saving lives. And above all, it is the question about whether a responsible citizen must unblinkingly think the unthinkable and accept that the morality of torture should be decided purely by totaling up costs and benefits. Once you accept that only the numbers count, then anything, no matter how gruesome, becomes possible. And I think this is an important thing to acknowledge because he put some really interesting questions that kind of help illuminate this. And this is actually not a very wonky article. I mean, I think everybody can read this and understand it, even though it's in a law review. Like, take, for example, the whole question of you have 50 people. You're reasonably sure that one of them has information about a bomb. Torture all 50? All right, you're on board for that. Why not bring in children and family members? Torture them in front of the 50. Why not? I mean, you've already accepted that it's okay to torture 49 innocent people to get for the possibility of breaking one. How are these children and wives and friends any more innocent than the 49 people you were already willing to torture a few seconds ago? This is the slippery slope, and this is why we can't let this argument run our whole debate. Yes, we may at some point, if we don't use torture, not stop an incident. But is that worth it? Is this worth the systematic degrading of human people in the thousands? I don't think so. Let's look at the costs.